So today's session, what we're going to be doing, I'll give you a little overview, is I'll read the bios of the panelists, and then what we would like you to do is just to think of a couple of areas where you believe you'll experience barriers between going from college to your professional walk, because those are the things that we're going to be touching upon. And then we have like five areas that we'll focus on, but we're open to more, exploratory conversation with you. We want this to be engaging, and so each time we make the point, and then I address it to the panelists to answer. Then we'll turn to the audience to see if anyone has questions that they want to ask in that particular area. Okay. So to share my experience and my background. Again, my name is Obed Figueroa, and I'm with AIGA, and it's a professional association for design, a long history, over 100 years of providing professional development for designers across the states. And so, we do this in a number of ways, and we have a particular focus going on right now, and for past few years, excuse me, with diversity and inclusion, making sure that we increase minority representation in design. So we have a lot of activities going on with that. And we'll be here later on to share more of that with you. So I earned my master's over in Stony Brook University, focusing on higher education and administration. So a lot of student development. And then also now I'm working on my doctorate at Northeastern, second year, focusing on higher education as well. And I'm with AIGA, with the sole task of, putting out the efforts and, to increase the minority representation in design. Stacy Sundar. Is a designer at Jessica Webb Design. She's also an AIG Diversity Inclusion Task Force Program Development and Implementation Committee Lead. So Stacy's helping us with that movement that I told you about in terms of increasing minority representation. Miles Anderson is a multidisciplinary design currently working in Austin, Texas. He's a product designer for IBM Design. Miles earned his BFA in communication design at Texas State University. Jacinda Walker, designer, instructor, and graduate of The Ohio State University. She earned her MFA in Design Research and Development and a minor in Nonprofit Studies, and she's currently serving as the chair for AIGA Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. So again, we're pleased to be here, and so we'll go forward with the engagement with you, and I'll pose the questions to the panelists. And so, one of the points that we wanted to focus on in this journey, going from college to profession, is the point of getting out of your own way. And so, I'd like to pose that to the panelists to see if they have any experiences that they want to share, and then ask you to think about any points that you want to make or questions you have on that area. Is there any insecurities that you've experienced in your journey from college, going from college to the profession, that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I actually think this is a really huge one. Earlier, we heard our speakers talk about how powerful we actually really are, but sometimes we really don't see that. And so when we think about what our journey as creatives ultimately is, the first biggest step is that you have to get out of your own way. You have to let those doubts go. You have to be able to trust your talent and trust what you've learned and trust that you are on the right place. I once watched a video and Oprah talked about you are exactly where you are supposed to be at. And really, really understanding that and believing that is how you move through the next step. You can't move forward if you're so busy holding the luggage that you can't move forward with because it's heavy, it weighs you down, it blocks your thoughts, it blocks your energy. You can't be creative. So you have to get out of your own way. You have to let all of that go and trust that you are in the right place at the right time doing the exact thing that you're supposed to be doing.
Anyone else?
I think just to piggyback on that, I'm actually a career changer, and I was in healthcare for over 10 years before I decided to do design. And I think I was always afraid of that fear of failure. So I think just letting that go and just putting yourself out there 110%, that'll get you there. So trust yourselves.
Yeah, I can speak on that. My experience, particularly when I was in college coming into it, was a really surprising one for me, because I had come from an environment where I was mostly in all black or black Latino sort of schools in Texas and Houston. I landed in Texas State University, where it was a majority white school in an art program where I was pretty much the only person who looked like me around. And it was, one, a huge culture shock for me, and two, I kind of felt like I didn't belong there. I was around so many talented people, and I didn't think I was that talented. We didn't have art in my high school. Famously, quite a bit of the funding for the arts in Texas was cut in the public schools. So because of that, we didn't have art. And I'm sitting in classes with students who came from nicer schools than I did. And they weren't just okay, they were good. And I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to get to that level if I'm having to work behind. But after a while, I realized that it actually wasn't a problem. And if I was willing to work hard and put my all into my craft, then I knew I could, at the very least, be good enough. But beyond that, I realized that I was willing to put in more work than most of those around me. And
Yes.
I saw my work improve. I saw my confidence greatly improve around that space as well.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate word that you mentioned is the confidence. You know, that's why as we were preparing for this, this is a big step, and particularly when you're a young designer and you're growing, you're trying to learn and decide what is your process, what is the way you operate, what is your personal integrity. And you really have to have the confidence to be able to say, okay, I will do this, I don't do that. That's just not where I'm at. And it's okay, because you can't be everything to everybody. It's absolutely okay. So,
You know, I've worked in higher ed for 17 years, and I've met a lot of students. And, you know, it's not a weakness to identify within yourself the challenges that you have, you know? And what you should be doing is admitting to that and working with someone, finding a mentor that can help you work through that to find the solutions. So I think it's the greatest strength when we admit, you know, the things that we need to work on and go forward. Right? Does anyone have any questions on this particular area? Okay, so we can move forward. So next point that we wanted to talk about is, you know, technology is wonderful, but it will never replace meaningful, impactful, and engaging conversations. So panelists, is there anything that you want to share in this particular area?
I think sometimes, particularly as designers, we spend a lot of time on the computer. A lot of time. So sometimes when you go to talk with your friends, you're kind of like, oh, let me get up. You know, you came for conversation, but you're doing this. And I am here to tell you, proof positive, that the technology is amazing. You can reach some incredible people. But it's never, ever, ever going to replace being able to look somebody in the eye and connect and have conversation and dialogue, and to express yourselves and say, hey, this is really what I'm trying to do. You know, I had a good colleague once tell me it's all about the ask, and sometimes you can't do the ask online. You have to look somebody in the eye and tell them what you want, and tell them how you can move things, what values and what opportunities you can bring to the work that they are doing. But you can't do that sometimes when you're not looking them in the eye. The impact isn't there. So you have to be able to talk and listen at the same time.
Yeah, to jump in on that as well, I love the idea of just being able to talk to people face to face. To be honest, I'm not a huge person. Not that I'm not on social media, it's just that I think there's like a limit, essentially, of how much I participate in it. Because I like real, meaningful interactions with real people.
Yes.
Particularly when I was in college and I was trying to like get a job and an internship, I used to show up at every AIGA thing going on in town. I would drive to Houston, show up at their chapter stuff, because I didn't want to be emailing people and asking them, hey, y'all got a space for me, or will you take a look at my portfolio? I would just show up with my portfolio in hand and be
Yes.
like, hey, you want to chat with me about it? And what I realized was that, one, they could put a face to the name. I wasn't just an email or a tweet. I was a real person that they just interacted with. And two, you bug people enough, they're going to remember you. And what I found was that I've developed a network of real people, not just through a digital means, but in a way that if there was opportunities or if they knew someone who was looking for a designer, they would reach out to me. They would let me know because, hey, they have an actual personal relationship with me that exists outside of the webosphere, you know?
Yeah, I think that nothing beats that face-to-face interaction. And during that interaction, that's where we all analyze these subtle cues that we give to each other. And based on those cues, we know whether or not we can trust someone. So those relationships and that trust, it's so essential to your careers as young designers that you just go out and meet everyone you can. It's worked really well for all of us here.
So if I can go a little deeper in a particular area, the college experience and there's the professional experience, right? And so I'm wondering, as designers, as I am not, in terms of presenting your projects in college or in a professional setting, coming with your uniqueness, right? I'm wondering, have you ever experienced challenges where those settings just really didn't either understand what you were presenting, your project, or in a profession, same thing? So I'm just wondering if you guys had any experience.
Yeah, I used to be the graphic designer for a school district in Ohio. I'm in Cleveland, actually. And I once lost an opportunity because I didn't talk. And at the time, I didn't really even know I lost the opportunity. What I do know is that I used to write the talking points to the projects because I was too afraid to go to the meetings. I was like, I'm just this kid. I'm not there. I'm not like some executive yet. And so I used to always write my communications director notes. When you're talking about this flyer, say these things. When you have to explain these pictures, tell them about this. Oh, and don't forget to tell them how to do the quotes because this guy will give us this kind of deal. So I would always send those questions, those talking points. I created those talking points. And once chief higher up was passing out opportunities, and he gave what I thought were, kudos to the talking points, but they were delivered by somebody else because I was too afraid to talk and to share what I created with somebody else because I didn't think I was good enough at that moment. And this person took trips and they had and I was just they didn't even know what to say. I wrote the talking points for them. So that experience was it was almost life altering because something that I could have said that could have advanced me, I chose not to say it and I didn't get the opportunities that came with it.
Anyone else can think of another situation, whether it be in college experience or professional?
Yeah, I've honestly something that I still struggle with, right? Like being in a certain position to share your work and present your work and be proud of it and stand up for it is something that I think will be a challenge for everybody in this room as a professional creative, something you're always going to deal with. And I know personally, particularly as a professional designer, early on, I found myself put it like this, I kind of thought I was a little bit of a hotshot at first. I got my job right out of college. I moved to Las Vegas. I was working for a company called Zappos. And I was a designer for them. And I thought I was pretty hot stuff when I showed up because I got a job. I just moved out from home. And but what I quickly realized was, one, you're not a hotshot. And two, it's not always going to be welcome for you, particularly as a junior, to voice your opinion on the way things are going or should be going. And I found myself shut down a couple of times. And some ways I viewed that negatively, but in other ways I really looked at it as a learning experience,
Yeah.
and where you have to, one, find the right opportunities to squeeze in there, and then two, you need to be humble and realize that you don't know the answer to everything, but even if you do know the right answer, sometimes powers that be can be in the way of that. But that doesn't mean give up on it. That just means you have to push that much more, or be a bit more elegant in your approach to such things.
I also think, in my particular experience as a woman of color, I felt like sometimes I've been in situations where my ideas weren't well received and people didn't quite connect with me. And actually, when I felt that way, what I did was I pursued other opportunities. So I began to network. I explored all the design organizations out there. And I found AIGA, which I'm really grateful for. And about a year and a half or so after that, I'm actually able to help them with programming to change things for people of color. So it's been amazing.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, your story as well. So I wanted to ask, what steps or tools you use to overcome that?
Well,
Did you hear that?
yes. Your question was, what steps and tools did I overcome?
Yeah, that you used to overcome that.
Yes. The first thing that I did, I spoke to my father about it because I was devastated. You know, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm a good designer. Why isn't this happening for me? And I realized that it was a way that I wasn't communicating. Because when you're in design school, you learn how to design. Mm-hmm. That soft skills piece, that you kind of just got to pick that up along the way. And so what my father challenged me to think about doing was learning how to be a more effective public speaker and communicator. And so I joined Toastmasters. And Toastmasters took me through a program. They talk about impromptu speaking and public speaking and prepared speaking. So there's like 3 different levels of communication. And I found out I excelled at impromptu speaking. I excelled at that. But prepared speaking, I was a little nervous about that. That's why I was great at writing the talking points. I could tell you all day about what I did. But going through that Toastmasters program, they take you through like 10 speeches that you have to do where you learn about different techniques. Like, hey, how to be persuasive. Hey, here's how to engage the audience. Hey, here's how to give eye contact. And the Toastmasters, I probably went through the program, I did it twice. The first time I did it just because there is a free opportunity that you can kind of go. A lot of organizations, they offer free sections. But then the second time I went through, I actually started giving public speeches, and having myself recorded in video so that I could see how I was looking. Like, because sometimes you think you look a certain way, but you really don't look that way. And so watching myself and going through this Toastmasters program, hands down the best thing I ever did as far as the soft skills portion of my career.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can jump in on that too. I didn't really have tools, but what I did have was a new approach, I would say. One was realizing that as a junior designer at the time, being pretty fresh to being a professional, one was the humbling aspect and realizing that I still had a lot to learn, even if I did feel like I was a talented designer. 2 was just shutting up and trying not to be a talking head in a room. There's, as a professional, there's an environment where a lot of times there's going to be a group of people who like to hear themselves talk and will like to dominate a conversation about particularly about something creative. As objective as creative things can be. I realized that one of the things that I was doing was trying to compete with those talking heads to make my voice be heard, because I wanted my creative view to be a part of the work that we did, even if it was just a little web banner or changing the color on a button on the website. I wanted my voice to be a part of the conversation. And it's not that I realized that I shouldn't have that voice, but it's more that I realized that just blasting more voice into a conversation doesn't actually improve anything, and it's not going to get my opinion into the work. A couple of things that I realized that I could do was, one, show the proof behind my work. So I used to go around and actually test my designs with people who worked at Zappos or just worked around me, or with my colleagues or former classmates, so I could actually have some data to back up what it was that I was trying to do. So one is having some ammo behind your opinion, because you know what they say about opinions, everybody's got one, right? But it's different when you have an informed opinion. An informed opinion can actually move a conversation forward. So there was that, and also realizing that you need to understand and hear what's going on so that you can actually respond to it, as opposed to my previous approach, which was trying to respond first before everybody else would. That approach isn't really, well, at least in my environment, it wasn't the most welcome approach. So I tried to do things a little differently, and I immediately noticed that I would have success with it, and I immediately noticed that I was taken a lot more seriously in the conversation. So that was my approach, and it worked out for me in the long run.
Any questions?
I know we have microphone runners. I'm not sure if they could kind of come down so that when people have questions, we're able to kind of give them the microphone so we can hear them a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any questions before we move on?
Does anyone have a question?
Okay.
Okay. So moving to the next talking point, building better relationships. So that's going to involve networking. And I'm just curious from the panelists, in your experience, how significant this was, whether it be in college, if you could speak to both college and the professional experience. Stacy?
I developed a process I'll share with you. I call it strategic networking. And I actually came from a background, my family did no networking, so I didn't really have any role models in that respect. But when I got to the professional arena, and I started my first graphic design job, and then I started going to AIGA functions, what I would notice is I would go to events, and I would talk to people, but the networking was totally unfocused. So what I do now, it's intense preparation. It's kind of like a strategy. So if I want to meet somebody, I will learn every single thing about that person so I can feel confident in speaking. Like, yes, I know you went to RISD, I know this, and it just helps my conversation flow so much more easily. So it makes me feel confident. So that's my technique.
I'm sure LinkedIn helps with that.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. And then link in with everybody immediately.
Yeah, networking is like crazy important. If you don't think it is, you need to change your opinion on that pretty quickly. Yeah. Like I mentioned a little earlier, and when I first got to the university that I went to, it was a pretty big culture shock for me, and I actually didn't feel very comfortable talking to a lot of people because I felt I had nothing in common with them. But you quickly realize that, particularly in a creative environment, that you do have something in common with these people. Y'all are all creatives. Even if they went to much different schools than me, or thought that I thought that they were more talented than I was, or less talented than I was, or were harder workers or less. It didn't really matter. We all had a string attaching us together. And by the time I realized that lack of confidence that I had in speaking with people and understanding a little bit more about them went away, because I realized I could connect with people. And I'm also a pretty eclectic person in my own interests, so I found that there was a way that I could, even outside of design or art or being a creative, there was always something that I could connect with people about, whether it was about me being a nerd and liking comic books, or what new Netflix TV show that I was binging or something. Like, there's always a foot in the door that you can have to make a meaningful connection with people. And I realized that when I was actually going through the university program. And it was so beneficial because I started meeting so many people in the industry, at least the local industry, who are still to this day my mentors. It's good to meet more people and know people who can help you out. You know what they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I would also add on top of that, it's not what you know, it's who you know and what they can do for you.
Yeah.
So you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who's looking for a new designer or who has an interest that overlaps with yours on a side project that you could get involved in. There's always something that you can do, and always some way that you can connect with people. So I urge everybody to do it, because it's especially in an environment like this where we're all here right now.
Yeah.
If you can go back to your respective program or your job or whatever, and knowing a new person or a new person you can connect with in the future, that is like so valuable.
Yeah, there's a gentleman, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. His name is George Fraser. He has a book out called Click. And in his book, his theory is that to make a great relationship, you need fit, timing, and chemistry. And with those three things is how you make the click. So Stacy's idea of strategic networking is the first step. You create fit.
It's real. Okay.
It's real. Fit is important, because you can say, hey, I want to go meet this person. They be like, who are you? Why?
Yeah.
But when you say, I want to meet this person, you're like, hey, not only do I want to meet you, I want to build a relationship with you, because I see there's a value and I see there's a connection in the things that we are trying to both accomplish together. You know, that's chemistry. And sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. You know, the two founders of Apple, perfect example. They had fit, timing, and chemistry all together. And so George Fraser's concept and his theories on power networking, he has a huge conference. I'm not sure what city it's in this year, but it started in Cleveland. It was in Texas for a while. It's been in Atlanta. But he talks about the power of relationship building. And he insists that as people of color, our next strives will not be based on the education that we have. It will not be based on our income status. Our next strives as people of color will come strictly because of the relationships with people that we have. That is how we will become successful in his mind. And the older that I've gotten, the longer I've been in the field, I realize networking is important, but it's the relationship building piece that's the critical component. It's the relationship piece that you can sit down with somebody and have a cup of coffee and say, Miles, this thing is just not going right. Like, I don't even know how I messed up, or did I do this? Did you see that thing? Mm-hmm. How did it come? What were your thoughts? You can do that when you have a relationship. If you don't have a relationship with Miles, how are you going to know? How can Miles say, that didn't even work, Jacinda, you thought it, no. But it's when you build those relationships that those opportunities actually come.
So one of the things that I've experienced throughout the years is students, approaching me and peers that I have and saying, I don't see anyone who looks like me, whether it be in faculty or maybe it's within their work environment, looking for that connection, And so with the panel, I wonder how you have internalized that kind of experience and how you work through it, how important it is for you to have people that you can relate to when you're going through your studies or when you were in your business environments.
Yeah, it is important to be able to have the people who you feel connected to. But what's also important is that the people that you feel connected to you. Mm-hmm. So don't spend a ton of time trying to make connections with people who you don't feel that they're invested in you. Take a moment to find out who they are and if they are invested in you. Their actions will show that. When they return your emails, when they say, hey, stay in touch with me. When I pass out cards, one of the things that I tell people is, listen, stay in touch. I'm not giving you this card because I just have tons of these to give away and I want to hear from you when I give you this card. So being able to create connections with people who are also invested in you is how I really learned to move forward and how to be able to create better relationships.
And sometimes you might want to stay in touch with somebody, but maybe he or she's especially busy at that time. Mm-hmm. So you must have some tenacity and keep trying. Give it a couple of times. Don't just think, oh, okay, he didn't call me back. That's that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having those like deeper relationships with folks that you encounter with, like it's going to be foundational to your career, like from the really starting now, right? Like the people you meet here, and you never know, you could end up creating like a meaningful connection to somebody.
Yes.
And that might go on for another 20 years, and you never know. I would say, at least personally, I have an example of this, that I have mentors who I met while I was in college, and they're still my mentors to this day. I've learned so much from these people, not only on my craft as a designer, but also they've connected me to more people. I've met people who have really changed my outlook on design as an industry. These people have informed my view so much that I think, honestly, I don't know if I'd be the same designer and sitting up here today if I had not met these people and interacted with these people. And if they, for whatever reason, if they didn't care about me the same way that I cared about the relationship that I had with them. I mean, Jacinda was right on. There's the connection that you want to build with someone, but if they're as invested in you as you are invested in them, then some magic can really happen. And not to say that you should be looking for something specific to get out of it, but you never know what can come out of it. And if it's something that's fruitful, you should continue to water and care for that relationship and see what it can grow into.
Okay. Is there any questions in this particular area? Gentleman there.
Oh, hold on, we can't hear you.
Sorry, let me get a mic over there. You got it.
Testing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on the topic of LinkedIn, I've been lucky enough to have established professionals reach out to me, but it's just a connection at that point. And I know how I handle it. I typically message them, ask them, what's going on with you? I check out their work, say, this is what I like. What are you into? But if you were in my position as a young professional looking for work, how would you handle that situation?
Well, the first thing I have to tell you is that when you do the LinkedIn thing and you send them a message and you're like, hey, listen, I'd love to know more about what's going on with you and that type of stuff, everybody's doing that. It's where Stacy's concept of strategic networking is critical. So if these people are in places where you're at, send a postcard.
Yeah.
It is amazing to get mail nowadays. Like,
I would love a letter.
oh my, a handwritten, like, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn. If I'm going to be in town, can I connect with you?
Or also share a piece of information. So if you know that they have this particular interest,
Yes.
send them an article, something they're interested into. That'll always get results.
Definitely, definitely. And realize that when you're connecting with that one person, you might not be the only one trying to connect with them. So you're a designer. You have to be more creative than the next guy. That's why you're here. Mm-hmm. So don't use what I call stale techniques and trying to get new results. That's just craziness right there. So be creative. Sending a handwritten postcard. My favorite, and I've done this and I've had it done to me, and both ways still feels great. You ready? Can I invite you for a cup of coffee? Really? You're going to buy me? Can we go to Starbucks? Because, the cup of coffee is like $6 there or something. But ask this person that you're trying to connect with, hey, listen, I know you're swamped. Let me know what your schedule's like. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee. Because coming out of your comfort zone to say, yes, I want something, but I want to give you something also, is really how you bridge this gap.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. The way I try to use LinkedIn, which is a very powerful and very beneficial tool, but I would say that the approach a lot of people have, if you got to imagine from the other person's perspective, you're a professional, you've been in the industry 20, 25 years, and constantly you get young designers hitting you up all the time, like, hey, can you connect with me? Hey, can you connect with me? And they might do it, but at the same time, you are one in a sea of people who are doing that. So how are you going to make yourself stand out?
Yeah.
The approach that I would take is very similar to what Jacinda's saying, which is I would try to create a real face-to-face connection out of that if it was someone I was specifically wanting to have a relationship with. But also, I would say that just leaving it at a digital connection is going to be limiting for like everyone in here's like career, right? Like if it's one thing to say that on LinkedIn I'm connected with Armin Witt or any famous designer out there, but what if you could actually say, oh no, I had like lunch with this guy, or I had a coffee with him. Maybe it doesn't turn into a job for you, but hey, you have a personal connection with that person that might be fruitful later on down the line. What I would say is that you can't assume that just because you have a LinkedIn connection with someone, if they see you at a conference, they're gonna stop and come walk up to you and say, "What's up, man?" You know, they
no.
Yeah, like no, you're just one of 1,000 people who've reached out to me today. But if you're actually trying to create a meaningful relationship with them, then I would say go for that over just stopping at a message on LinkedIn, or see how you can make that something a bit more fruitful.
You know, I was just thinking, you know, if you are aware of a special event that's happening where you both can attend it, you know, a mutual interest, an event, you can share that.
That's a good one.
That shows that it's reciprocal.
I was actually going to say that. I like bringing other people into my community and sharing friends with one another. I think those relationships create powerful bonds where we all benefit from.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the next point that we want to touch on. Find your community. So join an industry association, local, globally. So this is a wonderful strategy, one that AIGA, you know, presents, you know, statewide for sure. We have over 26,000 members across the states, and so there are, you know, networking opportunities that are phenomenal.
Yeah, 71 chapters. One of the things that I always say when I meet young designers, I'm like, well, who are you hanging out with? You know what I'm saying? Because as a creative, we bond and we vibe off of each other. So when I'm talking with Stacy and she's giving me these great ideas, I'm thinking about, wow, that's a good one. I didn't think about that. And then we're synergizing off of each other. And so having community is critical, which is one of the main reasons I came back to AIGA. But the one thing I really want everybody to understand is that it's hard to be a designer. It's hard. This is not for the lighthearted at all.
Yeah.
But to be a designer without community is even harder. So think about joining industry organizations as a way to increase your network, as a way to build better relationships, as a way to learning more about the soft skills that you have. And with it being 71 chapters across the United States, I'm pretty confident it's an AIGA chapter near where you are.
For sure.
Yeah, I immediately joined AIGA's chapter that we had on my campus when I found out about it. Granted, I didn't know anything about AIGA before then, but as soon as I found out, oh, I can connect with other people like in a more professional capacity, I was like, okay, I might as well do it. What's the harm that it could cause me? And what I realized was it wasn't just something that I could just check off, like, hey, this is a thing that I did, good for me. No, I actually gained a lot from it. I met like prominent local designers. I showed up at every event that I could around the local area, because what you figure out is that, like Jacinda was mentioning, that you are going to feed off of the vibes that you get from other creatives. It's just a natural thing that we do. But beyond that, like, if you can make that an ongoing thing, think about what that'll do for your work, what it'll do for you personally and professionally. Having that connection is like a powerful thing to have, particularly when you talk about like a national organization like AIGA. I met these guys through AIGA. And not to say that that's the only organization that you can join, but I know I would not be sitting here right now had it not been for AIGA. So there's benefit to that.
Likewise, I feel like by joining AIGA and having this wonderful community and group around me and all these positive, people, I feel more empowered. I feel like I'm taking my career in the way I want it to be, rather than just taking any, job that comes along. So I really enjoy that feeling.
Okay, any questions? Okay, so we'll move forward. So develop your brand. Your brand is your reputation. It begins in person, on paper, and online. It's your identity and the experiences people have with you that can open doors to new opportunities. So panelists, if you have any comments on that.
No, I love the being able to offer literature to help you kind of back some of this up. Stedman Graham has a book out called Brand You. And in this book, he talks about how you can begin to build your brand. And I think as young people, what's something amazing that you all have that I don't know if I have was this thing called the World Wide Web. Like, you can decide what your integrity is going to be by reading and learning from the other professionals in your community. You can really say, hey, listen, I'm going to do a video series like Francesca talked about earlier today. You can honestly say, hey, I want to connect and I want to work with more women of color. I want to work with people who are Latino. I want to work. You can do that online. You can be able to say, hey, this is something I value. This is going to be part of my brand. This is part of the type of designer I want to be. And being able to think about yourself and how you're developing as your bigger brand is a critical component to success.
Yeah, not only that, but, these days, all your business is out there, right? So everything you put online can, for the most part, can be seen, shared,
Yes.
and repeated by other people. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a mentor of mine was that a brand is not what an organization or an individual or a product thinks of itself. It's what the audience of that thinks of that entity. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, so I probably should clean up a little bit about what I'm putting out there, because I don't actually get to control that narrative. I can influence it, right, by what I choose to say, what I choose to do, and how I choose to formulate my digital presence, right? But at the end of the day, I don't actually control it. It's really what you guys think of me. You guys can all walk away and be like, Miles was an awful person.
Awful person.
Yeah, I try not to be. But the thing is that I don't actually get to control that. Your opinion is your opinion, and a brand is essentially what a mass of opinions becomes. So think about what you think of McDonald's. They don't want y'all to think it's gross, but a lot of people do these days, right? So when you think about your brand and your reputation and how you put yourself out there, it is in a large part something that you get to influence, especially in today's world. You can kind of curate that. But at the end of the day, once you put it out there, it's kind of out of your hands and it's in the world. So I would say it's something that you need to be very conscious of and be very particular about how you choose to do it, but also understand that there's only so much control that you can have over it. But the control that you do have is going to be monumental.
Stacey.
It's interesting because you said a lot about what I was thinking, but I was actually going to say when people connect to you and you're thinking about yourself as a brand, what they remember is that spark, how you made them feel, that emotional connection. So I think when you're thinking about how you're branding yourself, be very cognizant of the mood you're creating.
Mm.
Great. So any questions on that particular talking point?
One question over here.
I'm probably good with the mic. I was basically just going to ask, especially with social media, and we use it to discuss, talking earlier about all of the crazy things that are going on in 2016. How do you guys decide where to draw the line on expressing yourself and your beliefs, but also being very cognizant of, as Miles said, you don't get to control what somebody thinks about you maybe from that one tweet or that one status that you post, even if you're really passionate about that opinion, and you think it's well framed. Basically, how do you balance those two things?
That's a really good question, man. I think that if it's something that you really care about and it's not a popular opinion, you're more than entitled to put that out there, right? Because at the end of the day, that is you. And I would say that if it's something that's integral to who you are, I personally think that I don't know if I would want my brand to misrepresent me, or for me to not actually be true to myself in how I try to formulate my brand. So I have no problem posting about things that I think are important to me or I think should be important to other people. Now, granted, I might not go on a Twitter rant about it or nothing like that. I might try to be PG-13 in it. That's normally how I try to be on the internet. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to stand up for what I believe in. I think it's important that we all should, and if you want to put that out there, then you should stand up for yourself and do it. But at the same time, you know, like I was mentioning earlier, you don't get to control the narrative, and there might be some people who disagree with you or don't appreciate what you have to say, and I personally don't care. I would just continue to do it.
You should still be professional.
Yeah, you be professional.
Always bear in
Yeah.
mind, you know, as it is your brand, and it should just be framed professionally.
But see, I think that's where being an informed person comes in play. You can have these views, and it's absolutely nothing wrong with them. The issue is that how informed are you, and how factual are you? I mean, I personally love now people are able to go back and look at things that you talked about before. And it really speaks to how informed you are. So if this is something that you're passionate about because you are trying to have this dialogue or this expression, which you are entitled to that, just be informed about it and be prepared so that if something is portrayed or perceived in a negative manner, that you're informed enough to be able to apologize, or that you're informed enough to be able to say, wow, I don't agree, but I respect the fact that you let me know how you feel. You know, being able to be informed and to agree to disagree, there is nothing wrong with that.
Yep, I think that's actually the makings of a great personal brand, right? Being able to agree to disagree, I think, is a huge aspect of that. That's why I kind of mentioned that. Like personally, I agree with Obed as well. Like you got to be a bit professional about it, but at the end of the day, like it's up to you to decide whether you want to be meek about it or stand up for what you actually believe in. But that does not mean, you know, you have to go all Kanye on the internet and
That's
yeah, you don't have to do that.
Trump
But,
515,
yeah,
tweets 5:15 in the morning.
exactly. You don't have to do that, but if you do, you got to be aware that that's going to have an impact on how you're perceived. So
Exactly.
And I've actually seen that happen to a family member who was young professional, master's in education, and she's a teacher, and she just went rogue. I guess she got into a disagreement about Common Core and all these other things, and you know, rather than really taking a professional position, she was like putting things on Facebook that was like, you know, ghetto level, you know, and just like street talk, and that hit her in the face the next day because the parents of the students, I mean, everybody was all over it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and this was a college-educated, you know, master's in education person, but just didn't stop and think, this is going out to the world, and you're a professional, and, you know, you just have to frame it in a professional manner.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got another question.
Yes?
Are there any like common practices you do, like basically taking yourself out of your own shoes and maybe, you know, trying to see things through another before you like put things out that represent your brand?
Yeah, I consider myself very fortunate because I've always had a very great circle of women around me. I don't know how higher powers did this, but I've always had that. So when I feel myself going there, I talk to what I call the women board of directors of my life, and I say, hey, this really made me mad, and I'm about to do blank. Now, I have a couple of them that are like, you're about to do what? No, you're not. Perhaps you should try this, or think of this, or how would it perceived if? They give me that opportunity to let me vent for a few moments, because sometimes you just need to let that out. Sometimes you just need to have that moment. But having that board of directors around you gives you that those checks and balances that you kind of need for yourself, especially being a professional in this industry, being a person of color in this industry. It's important.
I would say watch it also with emails. Like we have this impulse to respond right away. And I really caution people not to respond when you're angry. Because once it's out, it's out.
Gone, gone, gone.
So just take a moment, catch your breath, talk to someone that you respect, get that stuff out there, you know, amongst yourselves, you know, face to face with another person that's objective. But don't do an instant. Don't feel like you have to answer instantly. You don't have to.
Yes. Great.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is take a minute to think about how visible something that I'm about to put out there is going to
Yes.
be, right? Like if there's one thing about like shooting an email to like my buddy that I had years of relationship with that might be really angry, but I know he's not going to go like share that and like, hey, look what Miles Anderson posted. That's not going to happen. But, you know, if I'm on Facebook where my account's not private, would someone see this? And if they would I be okay with them seeing that, like later on down the line? Another thing I always ask myself is, next year, would I look at that and feel like I was stupid? And if the answer is like maybe, I probably should post that. Like, there's a chance, and I should probably leave it alone.
Or even being able to ask yourself sometimes, you know, like, if my mom sees this or if my daddy sees this, is he gonna think like?
Yeah,
how
I get a whooping for this when I was a kid.
Is this how? Like, and so if you have to ask yourself the question, and if you feel doubtful in the response, you probably shouldn't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, don't mess your career up like that.
Okay, panelists. So thank you so much. You know, again, we appreciate being here and speaking with you guys, but that's the end of the session.